Good morning, you are listening to Awakening in Health, and let's start with the weather this morning. Apparently there is a high chance of showers near the coast and a medium chance elsewhere. The temperature is currently at a low of 21 degrees during the day and at a high of 28. And it's a little bit overcast as I'm looking out the window here in beautiful tropical Cairns. And this morning I have a bit of a treat. I've got a great guest that I've brought in here, and we are going to be talking about council. Welcome, Shane Cuthbert. Hopefully I've pronounced that okay.
Yes, good job. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Shane. So, listen, you're a man of many diverse talents. You're, I would say, compared to me, just a little bit on the younger side, but you're studying a double degree in law and in psychology, if I've got that right.
Yes.
You're a business owner.
Yes.
And you also have had a little bit of a challenging, I guess, time in your past, and it's kind of culminated in quite a fascinating journey insofar as you were actually incarcerated briefly, and
Yes.
now you're on the
Yes.
other side studying law. And we are going to touch on some of that stuff, but the main focus of the conversation really is going to be around your involvement and your passion in relation to, I guess, keeping the council more accountable.
Yes.
We've got a lot of issues everywhere, I think, all around Australia with that. But let's just start with that, with a brief kind of synopsis of how you got to be where you are today, and why you're passionate about the law, and maybe just a little bit about that previous turmoil, I guess, in your life.
Yeah, look, obviously here in Cairns we've got a huge youth crime problem, and I was somebody that, as a young person, I was involved in crime. Fortunately, I never hurt anybody. And I think a lot of these kids, are thinking along the same lines. I mean, they're thinking, for the most part, they don't hurt people. They're after your car or something like that to go out and get a bit of a joy and a thrill and that sort of thing. And look, I've been there, done that. I've actually got a great relationship now with another Cairns local, the legend Pat O'Shane. And as you know, she was a former magistrate, and the first time I ever went to court and got sentenced down in Blacktown, New South Wales, Pat O'Shane, funnily enough, was the magistrate. I'm going back 15 years or something like that. I'm 32 now. But, so I've been there and I've gone through that process. And, I'd love to say that the sentence I got that day put me on the straight and narrow and that sort of thing, but it didn't. It's a process. It's a long process. As you mentioned before, I did spend time in custody later on, and horrendous things happened to me in custody, and that really significantly, not only did it significantly impact my life, but it really influenced those changes. I've always been very intelligent and done well, and many things that I've applied myself to. But this helping others really comes from that trauma that I suffered. And I think, look, there's better ways to do things. I think there's better ways we can do things. And I've gone through a lot of stuff where not many people make it out the other side. So to make it out that other side, I think I've got a responsibility to, do something about it. And about 3-4 years ago, it was just before the last state election, I was asked to join this Facebook vigilante group, and I didn't know crime was that bad. And, when I got that, I thought, wow, this youth crime stuff's out of control. I wanted to learn more about it. I went to speak to our local member, Michael Healy. I sent an email to Warren Ench's office. He called me from Canberra. Spoke to the leaders in our community to go, well, what are we doing? How are we doing it?
So just to pull it back for a second, so when was your first, you just had one incarceration?
I've been incarcerated 4 times.
4.
Yeah.
And roughly what ages were you?
Early 20s.
Early
20s, yeah.
And what was the longest spell, if you don't mind sharing that?
6 months, so not a long time, not a great deal. 1 time sentenced, and the other 3 times I was released, either charges withdrawn, no evidence offered, or not guilty after a court trial.
For sure. And just in relation to the getting, I guess, a custodial sentence, do you feel that was warranted or justified in relation to your actions, or do you think was there a few systematic kind of procedural things that were not great there? Can you tell me a tiny bit about that?
I'm still 50-50 on that myself. So if I go back to the one time where I was sentenced to 6 months in prison, I had 11 charges. I had 4 drink drivings, resist arrest, evade police, trespassing. I was out of control, and I had some issues there with drugs and alcohol. I needed some more support. Look, prison probably wasn't the place. I did need something. I did need some intervention. I needed someone to say, hang on a second, mate, we can't just keep letting you go because you're just, I drove to the police station while I was on bail to report. For drink driving. So, I had a complete disregard for the law and respect. I had no respect for myself at the time. Look, then I went to prison. It was very traumatic for me.
Because you were assaulted in prison, I guess, as well.
Yeah. And, I'd never been there before. And look, I got into a little bit of trouble in my life, like a public nuisance here or something like that. And nothing serious. So I was in there with guys that, had been in there their whole lives and, very violent people. And, I was celled up with a rapist and had a very, very hard time in there as a young person. Very naive, very green, they call it. And it just wasn't the place for me. I could have really done with some more support. And after, the things that happened to me in there, I needed even more support when I got out than I did when I went in, And
it's almost an interesting example, isn't it? Because you were dealt with by the system, and I actually worked for about 18 months in drug and alcohol, and so I had a lot to do with heading up to the prison and seeing people and trying to instigate programs to change their behaviours. But I think until you get exposed to that, and even before I was doing that work directly, there almost is this community feeling that once you're a criminal, you're already bad.
Yep.
There's not much that can be done. And we do have this thing about recidivism. But here you are sitting here having, I guess, almost being tainted by that system to the one extent, but you're still coming out the other side being what the community might assume now as being an upstanding citizen who is contributing. So there's two parts to that. One is that we shouldn't be sitting in this place where if you've done bad stuff, that's the end. There's hope for everybody to make very powerful changes in their lives, and you're an example. And then the other thing is, which we have to question, is the value of that system in relation to exposing people who, as you said, were rather naive but not really bad to elements in that system where maybe we're actually making people who were not so bad worse. And I know we're using very loose terminology there. So in relation to that, did you find that you were exposed to a number of different paths whereby you could have ended up being that classical, I don't know, multi-reoffending male who gets even further into drugs and alcohol? Or did you think, hey, this is, this was good, this kind of shocked me into being better?
Look, a bit of both. Obviously when I was released, I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of work with a psychologist, great psychologist here in Cairns. And it was a long process. It wasn't I didn't have that light bulb moment. I got a lot of people that, I work with a lot of people now trying to help them, and everyone's looking for that answer. They can just flick the switch and change everything. And it is a journey. But I definitely felt myself going both ways. I felt myself wanting to get more involved in drugs and alcohol as well, because I've gone through a lot of trauma. So, I wanted to deal with that and didn't have the tools I needed to deal with that. But I also then felt a little bit like I think a lot of people feel like is, well, I've been labelled a criminal. I'm tainted. I've been released now. I was homeless living on the Esplanade here in Cairns. That's where my journey started here in Cairns 6 years ago. So I've come a long way since then. But you get out, I've got no accommodation, no support, no family, no friends, very, very isolated. And you do get those thoughts pop into your head that go, what's the point? Why bother?
Do you think it was more luck than anything else that you didn't diverge down the more negative path, and you kind of, was it a quirk of faith, or was it, do you think you were at risk of really going back in that more negative direction even worse after prison, or not?
I think it was a bit of luck. And also, I've spent a very minimal time in custody. I really just got that taste and went, look, I don't like this. Sometimes it's awful tasting medicine, but the patient needs it. But I think that's the key for me. There's a lot of other guys, I see it now. So there's guys that might, they're on under the influence of drugs. They rob a service station, right, for $20 with a screwdriver. And those guys they're going to get sitting prison for 3-4 years. They're going to get out after 3-4 years of their life gone and go, well, what's the point of trying to change now? I've already lost that much. And that's the mentality, and that's something that I can associate with. I've felt that. I have managed to turn it around, but that's why I'm now trying to devote the rest of my life to helping others do the same.
And do you feel there's a lot of disparity in the system? And I know I've kept an eye on some of the proceedings in the courthouse. And one story that comes to mind is an Indigenous fellow who was on parole on a 13-year sentence, who committed this 5-day crime spree, and there was people sitting there expecting at the least that the original sentence would be re-established. And this fella, just from memory, I think smashed about 4 or 5 cars over a weekend, home invasion, stealing keys, and his sentence at the end of all this ended up being something like 18 months.
Yep.
So not even the consideration for the previous spell that was sentenced.
Yes.
But then even a very small for the second one. And then yet you have had drunk driving offences.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you get a 6-month custodial sentence. It seems to me there's a lot of stuff out of kilter.
There is, and it's a lot more common, I think, up here in North Queensland as well. I think obviously we do have a large Indigenous population. I hate to say it, but racism is alive and well up here, which is terrible. Obviously, someone coming from Sydney, I can see it, and I think it's disgusting. And it's very it's shocking to me because there is such a large Indigenous population here, and I've seen it in court a lot.
When you say racism, are you talking in just one direction or both directions? And what I mean by that, just to clarify, are you talking about white towards black racism,
yes,
or black
I think
towards
so.
white racism?
Yeah, and I've seen it pick up more recently because we do have more of our Indigenous population now disadvantaged in the community, sleeping rough, and so they're more sort of visible, and people are getting quite vocal about it, especially business owners in town. And yeah.
And again, I saw another statistic, and it was just referring to the amount of money that was spent and the number of NGOs that are supposedly we're putting our tax money towards that are meant to be addressing this system. And we're talking absolutely massive sums of money, and organizations in well over 20 to 30 that are from memory. You have to ask, what are these organizations doing, and is our money getting spent in the right places?
Yeah, of course. It's a very real question. Something I've, immersed myself in recently. When I was homeless, I ended up at the Quigley Street homeless shelter, which is, it's been shut down. They haven't been able to renew their lease. I think Anglicare had the lease. And, I went by there to do some videos the other day and share a little bit about my story. And it's sad to see because that was a service that helped me. I've gone to speak at... it's not Ozcare anymore, on the corner of Draper Street, across from council actually. I went to a council meeting in the morning and went to go speak to the homeless fellows that were living there. It's the hostel there, the men's hostel. And so that's a service that is still running, that is doing good in the community, which is great. But yeah, I'm not sure what's happening or where the money's going, but there has been some service shut down over the last couple of years.
So it seems even regardless of the services being shut down, more money is going in.
Yeah.
And, I'm with this show, I'm very conscious that I want people to know that it's my opinion. It's not necessarily the opinions of the show. So I really like to stand in my truth and say what I want to say when I want to say it. So I don't mind saying stuff that probably is not politically correct. But I see a lot of non-government organizations, and they're brand new cars getting around. They seem to be social workers tripping over each other, and nurses and support people. And it almost seems to me that it's these, I don't know, directors first off, then the administration structure, and then the employees that seem to be getting the benefit of all this money, and it doesn't seem to be effectively getting towards the people that might need it, the homeless people, the people on the street. What comments would you have on that?
Look, I've got to agree with you. I think there is a ridiculous amount of money getting spent, and it's not translating into real solutions. And you're right. I see fleets of vehicles getting around, all nice and sign written, and it's something we've got to look at. And I'm not sure what the issue is there. Is there a lack of accountability? Is the government, who's obviously funding this stuff, are they not? Is there not KPIs in place or checks that are happening to say, well, are you guys meeting your targets or doing what you're doing? So it's something that obviously would need to be looked at.
And it's not like it's quite straightforward either, is it? Because one area, the state does this, the local government does this regulation is here. So it's very, very confusing, isn't it? It
is. And it's confusing for organisations too, I think, because, I see a lot of organisations where, even just with, let's say, state funding, they might have state funding from youth justice for a program, but then they might have some funding from child safety for another program. So what we have then is you've got this overlap of funding and different programs. Is someone keeping an eye on where it's going? I don't know. I mean, I'd imagine they would be.
It's a nice time to take a break just to, lighten up the feeling. So I'm going to chuck a song on here, and I haven't heard this one before, but we'll take a small little break now, and we'll be back very soon. You're listening to Dennis O'Connor at Awakening in Health, and I'm talking to Shane Cuthbert. Got butchered at that time, my apologies, Shane, who's a local businessman here who is very passionate about doing something actively in council to be able to address a range of issues in our local community here. Welcome back to Awakening in Health. It is a beautiful overcast day, I think, in Queensland, in Cairns, and I'm talking to Shane Cuthbert about crime and his passions as a local businessman in the Cairns community. So we just left off about maybe the lack of awareness and the accountability in relation to what seems to be a lot of money getting thrown at the problem of not just the poverty with Indigenous people, but poverty in general and homelessness in general. And from what I gather, Shane, that would have been maybe one of you felt strongly enough about this accountability and about what was happening in the community to kind of embark on a little bit of a journey to try and sort out some of these problems as you see them. So tell us about your future plans in relation to either being a part of that system or doing something about it, and why you feel that's important. And also, even if we talk about some hurdles you might have experienced getting there, and you know where I'm kind of taking this conversation. So please, let us know what happened there.
Yeah. Look, I mean, even just as a young law student, I made quite extensive submissions to a number of parliamentary inquiries, state government inquiries, and just to hold the government to account and influence, the direction where we're going. A lot of these inquiries, I may be one of 40 organisations that make submissions. I've been invited to speak to Parliament on a couple of occasions. One of the most recent was the Victims of Crime inquiry. So I'm doing what I can with the capacity that I have to try to make a difference. I mean, I've attended most council meetings over the last 18 months. Usually it's only myself and the Cairns Post.
Do you think there's a lot of politicism in that? Because I've got a little story that I know about that exact meeting, that Victims of Crime meeting, where it seemed when a few females stood up and maybe some Indigenous people stood up, there was rapt attention. And I think you had a very, very important story to tell. And it seems that all the people who should have been listening were tapping on their phones and sending messages.
Yeah, look, and it's like anything these days. People have a short attention span. I did talk about a few important issues, I think, and, I was invited back to meet with Jonty Bush and Peter Russo, who were Peter Russo is actually the chair of that inquiry. So I spoke to them that afternoon and the next morning again. So they were very keen to pick pick that up and discuss it a little bit more, and we've had the recommendations come out now. But look, I think for the most part, that was not put together very well. There was a lot of victims here that, wanted to be heard, that felt that they weren't given the opportunity, or there was a lot of members of our community that they found out about it because it was on Channel 7 the night before, and they were quite upset about that. On these inquiries, there is a correct procedure, and you make submissions, and then you get invited to come along. And also there was, a little bit of, I think there was a few members of our community that were upset because our local leaders, such as Michael Healy, was not there. This was a victims of crime inquiry. So these are people that have experienced a lot of pain, trauma, suffering, that felt like they were not listened to. And we had an inquiry come up from Brisbane, which was great. I think people really got into that and supported that. But yeah.
Is this Australia wide, or is this just Cairns? Is there a small picture, a bigger picture, or both? This is statewide.
Yeah,
okay.
This was a statewide inquiry.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they came to Cairns, because not all inquiries hit the road. A lot of them, they take place in Brisbane, and if you don't have enough to pay for your flight to go down there, then your voice isn't heard. So I'm glad that they did at least take the initiative to put it on the road and come up here. I'm sure at great expense to the taxpayer anyway. But, it's good to see that, they're doing something with those and actually listening to us up here.
Will it achieve much, do you think, or is it posturing for the press? And I think there's way too much of that happening in general.
Look, I do think that after speaking with Jonty and Peter Russo, I think there was a genuine sense there and desire there to make some positive change. Jonty lost her father to a one-punch attack, and lost her sister in a domestic violence homicide. So she's someone that is very passionate about victims and change. So I think there's a genuine...
So in spite of there being a motive and a passion for the change, it seems to me that you can have all the passion you want, but we get railroaded. And know you're aware of the situation that happened recently here with the cashless decision. Yep. So that was, for any viewers or listeners, a decision made by the local council, by the CEO of the council, in fact, not the mayor, who seems to be an unelected person who has a hell of a lot more power than I ever voted for, to basically have cashless in a lot of the council venues. And to me, that was a bit of a slippery slope. So I got a little bit active with that in relation to having where does that stop? We have cashless in the whole of Cairns. So a community member, Frankie, stood up and really was instrumental in getting a movement happening, where we had, on the day of voting, over 200 people at council. And it seemed to be that the councillors ran scurrying under rocks, and they would have unanimously, I think, carried this decision for cashless. There's a few points I want to make here. One is, until the efforts of some of the community members, absolutely nobody was aware of this.
Yes.
And Frankie did lots of active work by asking people for signatures, and the by far the majority of reactions she got was, what? We don't know. I think that's a huge issue at first. So the second point I'd probably touch on is that there's a lot more issues than that for me. The surveillance, the security cameras in every frigging corner, it seems they're watching me, not the crime, because crime is going up. How can we use passion like yours, or even inspire people that might be listening here, to step up and hold these people accountable? What can we do?
Look, I think we saw a perfect example that day with the cashless. As I mentioned before, I've been going to council meetings for the last 18 months, and it's usually only myself and the Cairns Post. And when we had the cashless getting debated, it was absolutely overflowing. They had members of our community downstairs watching on a TV screen, and every single councillor basically did a backflip on that, because they were held to account. And I don't think that they're held to account enough. But I think, look, that's there for anybody listening. If you can show up and start attending some of these meetings and get involved and show these people that you are passionate about the community and what they are doing, holding them to account, they will think twice before they make decisions affecting you.
It's a numbers game, isn't it? And while we're in this fait accompli mode of, oh, well, it's all just going to happen. Nothing's going to change. But at least if people are getting active and rocking up, especially in numbers, they're shining that light and having that scrutiny. I think you're right. I think it can help in some way.
Yep.
And some ways better than nothing. But even more than that, and I'm very interested to hear this story about people like yourself. We have this idea that the council members should be kind of working and helping us and working in our favour, but it seems to me that they don't like the scrutiny.
No.
So tell us more about that.
Look, and you've got to think, these people are humans, and we don't like scrutiny, and we don't like, obviously, negative press or negative things said about us, and that's just a natural thing. But, it's a necessary evil. I think if you want to be a leader in this community, you've got to step up and you've got to take that. You've got to take the good and the bad, and you have to own those decisions that you make.
But more to the point, I believe that you had the police meet you outside council one day. How did that come about?
It was actually the Parliament. Queensland Parliament came to Cairns.
Gotcha.
And I was excluded by the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Curtis Pitt, who happened to step down just a couple of days after that. But yes, I was told that if I attended, I would be arrested. So naturally, I challenged that decision and I attended. I spoke with police, their hostage negotiation team the week prior, and it was all sort of organised. It wasn't staged. There was a very real threat of arrest there, and they brought a van down and 8 police officers, but I chose not to try to enter. But
why were you so banned, I guess would be the word?
Well, look, he's the thing. I was given no reason.
So just to backtrack slightly, your intention to attend there was
Yes.
as a concerned citizen, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
And for some reason there was something either about you or on your record or something that you said
Yep.
where you were deemed persona non grata or some kind of, I don't know, threat
Yep.
to the safety of these dignitaries or what. So where does that come from?
Well, see, this is what I wanted to challenge that day, and because I did have a lot of people say, "Well, look, why bother? Just don't attend." But I think it's really important that we do and we keep the pressure on. These are people that are making decisions that affect our lives and the lives of others, and they're spending the money that we give them, via taxes, and they should be held to account. So if they want to start excluding members of the community without giving them proper, reason or following procedure, I think it's wrong, and I'm going to take a stand, because if it's not me, who is next?
And who made that decision and why? Do you even know?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, it could be a number of things. I actually have a legal dispute with the Labor Party at the moment. I used to be a member. My membership was cancelled, and I took the Labor Party in Queensland to the Supreme Court here in Cairns. That matters now in the Court of Appeal and quite possibly going to the High Court. Again, they thought that they could exclude me as a member. I was a member for 14 months. I was working on a Lighter Faiths federal campaign and for free, as a volunteer, putting in really a large amount of hours. I was outside in the sun, door knocking and doing all of that sort of thing. And I think what they did was wrong, and I don't think they expected me to take them to court.
So we're saying that you were fully supporting this party, and
Yes.
because of maybe the way you were thinking and
Yep.
what you were saying,
Yes.
they essentially penalised you for thought crime.
Yes.
And
yes.
they've kind of said, oh, well, we don't like the way you think. See you later.
Yeah, and look, I've got a real good relationship with my friend really here, Rob Pine, who is a councillor, who was a Labor Party member and was the MP for Cairns in Parliament. So he knows these people, and I looked to him for a lot of advice, and he said, look, that's just their way. That's how they do things. They're threatened by you. So I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I must be doing something right. If I'm being excluded and they think, look, we need to sort of get rid of this guy, then I'm obviously, treading on some toes and I think doing something.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating for me. I'm quite interested in the global political scene, and one of the positions I hold, whether people agree with it or not, is that there's no left, there's no right. It's the bankers controlling both heads of this party, because it seems to be that if you're Labour, we're going in that more left area more quickly, than if we were the opposition, but we're still getting there. I remember having these discussions 20 years ago in Australia, and the left is going to do this, the right is going to do this. No, we're still getting to the same place, which seems to be a community that's more divided,
yes,
more divisive,
yes,
more surveillance,
yep,
more tracking. And then when we see this link up with where some of the money is coming from, and by that I mean these international and these European organizations which are funding things like smart cities,
yep,
and the push for this greener, this concept of greener energy and whatnot, which is also an absolute farce. I don't care if anybody's listening here. The amount of resources that are put into things like lithium batteries are absolutely horrendous. All this push for electrical cars, the so-called carbon footprint on that is absolutely horrendous. You will never make back the energy spent to make these things. The same with the windmills, which are horrible. They're a blight on our landscape. The making of these things will never recover the cost of their production. People should look into this. The minerals, the elements that are required, you're never going to get them back. So it seems that it's not. The scientists have to know this, because I'm not a scientist. I see stuff, but I see more than enough stuff everywhere to make me convinced that the position I take is more accurate.
yeah.
So it seems that it's not really about a greener society or a fairer society. It seems to me to be a very kind of malicious push to control us more.
Yes, 100%. And we're seeing that in local council a lot. As you mentioned before, the CEO had made this decision to bring in the cashless. Now, the Cairns Council, so the Mayor and the CEO are members of the LGAQ, Local Government Association Queensland. They meet in Brisbane, where they decide what are we going to roll out statewide, and basically all the councils, that sign up to this thing have to toe the line, and no one's challenging that. Actually, there was a challenge at the last council meeting recently, and that was the decision to stop councillors raising general business motions. So every councillor at a meeting can raise a general business motion. So there might be something happening in their division or electorate, and they want to say, hey, this is an issue, I want to bring it to the table. They've taken that opportunity away from them, and they've got to, provide in writing, details 2 weeks beforehand, and, just makes the process more difficult.
More confusing, more complexity.
Yes.
I would be almost saying it's almost like it's another way of blocking what
yes.
the community wants by making it just too damn hard. And even
yes.
the terminology, it just really makes me quite
yep.
frustrated when I hear that. Sorry to cut
and you had we had Kathy Zeiger, an independent councillor, Rob Pine, Brett Olds and Amy Eden challenged that, and unfortunately it was 4 votes to the rest, and they lost. So that now has been taken away, and it's and they were talking about democracy, and it's undemocratic. If there's issues, they should be able to be raised. So that's just an example there of the state government, Brisbane, LGAQ, these people that are down in the CBD, in the city, very far away, are controlling what we do and making our decisions. And I think local councils really need to get back to supporting grassroots initiatives and members of the community. And we saw that with the cashless.
Absolutely. My feeling is it's even more, it's deeper than that. I think we're getting our orders from Europe, from these massive corporations. Like people, when I talk about the World Economic Forum, they
yep.
sometimes roll their eyes and they look at you. But this organization has trillions of dollars to spend, and it has one of the most incredible websites you would ever see. The depth in this website is no one person could, I think, ever go through it in even a year. And everything is spelled out there.
Yep.
They have plans for every single country, including Australia, and those plans seem to be going towards what I'm talking a little bit about recently, which is this smart city, and also you have the minutes in the little term. So a 15-minute
yep.
city, a 10-minute city,
yep.
a 5-minute city. Do you know anything about that?
I have briefly heard about the 15-minute city term thrown around, and that is really not preventing but influencing people to really stay in their community and not branch outside of that. It's the idea is everything is within that 15-minute range, and you have no need to go and see what's happening over there in the regional communities.
And yet we're talking walking distance as well,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the idea is, let's say our local town here in Cairns,
Yep.
You have a zone,
Yes.
and within that zone of how long would 15 minutes take to walk? Maybe a kilometre, 2 kilometres?
Yeah.
So within that 2 kilometre zone, that's as far as you're allowed go.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you go further through a car, a plane, or a bus or a train, or, exert yourself more, if you're producing too much CO2, you suddenly become a less positive member of society, and you might have more fines or penalties. It makes me laugh, that word fines. There's nothing fine about it at all.
Yes.
But is that the understanding you have also of this idea of,
I
of
think
these minute
so.
cities?
Yeah, I mean, I've only briefly heard about it, and I can't even tell you where I've heard about it, but I have heard it pop up quite a few times, and I'm everywhere, man. I'm out there in the community doing lots of stuff, Parliament stuff, council stuff, and I've heard about it. Yeah.
Excellent. We might open that a little bit more, but we'll just take another break with a little bit of music. You're listening to Awakening in Health. My name is Dennis O'Connor, and I'm talking to a really pleasant fella here, Shane, who is a local businessman who's very passionate about trying to see things getting fixed in his council, to the point where he's actually studying law, psychology, and looking to be a council member himself. And so far, I'm really liking his ideas and what he's got to say. So I hope people out there listening are enjoying the conversation also. Welcome back to Awakening in Health, and we're talking to a local businessman, emerging lawyer and psychologist, Shane, who is very passionate about trying to fix some very real problems that we got in this local society here. And it seems to be that the powers that be are investing substantial amounts in trying to do exactly that. But is that investment working, Shane? Are we effectively dealing with crime here in Cairns?
Look, for those who attended the last council meeting, we got a CEO's report. It's a monthly report where all of that stuff is documented. And what we've seen is that in the last month in Cairns, homelessness has gone up 13%, or reports of homelessness, people sleeping rough in the CBD. And we've also had a rise. It was 21% of public intoxication and 27% rise in crime. Now, Councillor Amy Eden, who is the Division 5 councillor for the CBD area, she questioned that report by the CEO and asked, look, why is crime rising? And the CEO's response was that we had more police in the CBD over the last month. And look, that's really interesting, because when you look at that, that more police in the CBD equals a rise in crime, shouldn't it equal, less crime? So when you start thinking about that, I mean, you can really go down the rabbit hole with that stuff, because it's quite interesting that more police equals more crime. How does that work?
So what do you think is going on there? Are we getting... I mean, when I drive around here, the town here, it seems that at every corner there's a police car looking for me if I'm going to, quote unquote, break the law because I didn't indicate on a left-hand turn or something like that. And then it seems that you go to some areas and it seems lawless. What's happening? So the first question I would have is who's being criminalised? Who are the police looking at?
Yep.
And then the second question I would ask would be, because of the increase in the police, are they just, making criminals of people who generally try to do the right thing? Or is that extra resources going in the right direction, do you reckon?
I've got some personal experience with this. Probably about 2 years ago in the Cairns CBD, I was arrested and charged with a public nuisance offence that was later withdrawn by the police. What happened, I'd left the Gilligan's nightclub. I'm a 30-year-old, intelligent. I was a law student at the time. I've dealt with police before. I saw a group of probably 30 Indigenous males looking like they were about to fight. And I went and it was probably a scary situation for anybody else. If you're a tourist, it probably would have been a bit intimidated. But I went in there and I put myself in between these two fellows and broke up the fight. Now, when police arrived... I'm telling these people that they've got rights, and I'm telling the police what they can and can't do, and they didn't like that, so they slapped the handcuffs on me and took me down. Now, it wasn't until I went to court, I challenged the charge, and I got the CCTV footage, half an hour of it. So there was half an hour prior to my arrest. The police were watching these Indigenous people beat each other up. They were moving the cameras and following them throughout the CBD, right? Now, I didn't see all of this stuff. I just come out as a good Samaritan trying to sort of break up a fight, keep everybody out of jail, make sure everything was okay. And I was then targeted. The moment a couple of white people come out that do have a voice, my voice is pretty loud, then I was criminalised for that. So
there's a few issues there, isn't there? So it seems that... do you think it's got something to do with, let's say if you had copped a fine,
yep,
might it have something to do with the fact that you are in a position to pay it, but some of these other people that the cameras are on, it's a broken kind of justice system, so where one, they can't pay these fines, and secondly, even trying to do the follow-up, it's just in the too hard basket, whereas you with your driver's license and your nice fixed address and blah, blah, they know exactly where you are, when you are, how you are. Do you think that might have something to do with it, or am I...
Exactly. No, 100%. And look, I actually was invited to speak to there was another inquiry about 6 months ago. I took my friend Rob Pine, the decriminalisation of public offences such as begging, public intoxication. And really what I was saying was, arresting these people that, are down on their luck. If you're begging and asking for money, you're doing it pretty tough. And I've seen one of these guys in court, that had come in for begging. It was his fourth time, and the magistrate threw the charge out basically and said, look, if I give this guy a fine, he's not going to pay it. He was asking for money, so I'm just going to further, push him down the way. But so I do agree with, I think, what you're saying there is that, you go around fining people and it just keeps the thing going. When I left New South Wales, some time ago, I can't remember when it was, but before I left New South Wales, the highway patrol there was privatised. And what I meant by that was they separated from the police force, and they then had to raise revenue to keep their cars on the road and to keep themselves employed. So what happened, almost overnight, you saw double the amount of highway patrol cars. You wouldn't have, say you'd got pulled over, back in the day, a cop might go, look, mate, just put your seatbelt on and go home, drive safe. They will 100% fine you now because they've got to raise that revenue.
And this, what you're saying is really, really vital for people to know. We have these areas within government's councils, as you said, the highway patrol. This is now private. And as a private company or an organisation, you have a fiduciary arrangement, agreement. So that means that you have to make profits, you have to make money. So... And this is what I think, this is a subjective question, so hopefully I'm not leading the question too much here. But these cars on every corner, the speeding cameras, the speed traps, it's not for our safety. It is, I think, a blatant money grab to have these fat organisations get fatter and richer off our backs. I don't know if you agree with that or how you feel.
Look, I think as somebody that has been very involved in council, state government, part of a political party, what I've seen is that a lot of this stuff happens it's not aimed at fixing a crime or providing a solution. It is really about how it looks. I feel like these governments at all levels of government are more interested in how things look than how they actually are. I think they want to have the look of police on every corner and make people feel safe, but are they actually contributing to a safer community? No.
And even along those lines, we have all these reports, but the manipulation that can happen is incredible. The way the figures can be skewed by just changing the date a little bit or just changing the sample of who you're speaking to. There's so many ways of presenting figures and facts in the paper, which... I think I'm hearing you say, and I'm seeing this, that on the ground we're not seeing that. They can paint as rosy a picture as possible and show how good the money is, or where all these great things that the money is doing. But on the ground, I'm not seeing it.
Well, look at what I just mentioned before about the Cairns Council CEO report, where crime is increasing. Now, that was all that was provided to the councillors. So what happens then is you make decisions where you go, hey, we need more police because crime's rising. But when they were challenged and questioned about the report of crime going up, and the answer was there's more police in the CBD, it really reframes that. That's
a very, very important point, Shane. So, okay, I'll say it for you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll say it for myself, sorry. I'm hearing here that the more crime goes up, the bigger the business can be, the more money you can get.
Well, yeah.
And if there's more police here, if they're targeting the easy marks, like you and me, there's more money there.
Yep.
And then this kind of feeds the beast.
Yeah.
What the hell can we do about it?
Look, we need to really mobilise and put pressure and make these and hold these people to account. And there is a lack of that. There is some people that just don't know what they can do. There's others that just they can't be bothered. I mean, the other thing that's really difficult is council holds its meetings on a Wednesday, right? And people are at work. I'd like to see more debates happening, after hours, and give people the opportunity to come and hold these people to account.
And by the time you've got your work week done and you're feeding the kids, or maybe you're having the stress of the mortgages and the income leads to pressure on your relationship, you're kind of tired, maybe fighting with your partner. It's tough to go to these things and to hold these people accountable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shane, we've got a few minutes left here, but how can people talk to you? Do you want people to get in touch? If so, how does that happen? What would you like to see happen? Tell us how anybody listening here can, I guess, support what you feel passionate about.
Yeah, look, I've made the decision to run for council at the next election, so I'm really on the campaign trail now, nice and early, and I have gone to all of these meetings for the past 18 months because I don't want to be somebody that puts his hand up 2 weeks out. I want to be someone that's got a real track record there for getting involved and engaged and making change. I don't want to sit there and collect the paycheck. So, obviously I'd be looking for that support in a couple of months, but I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. My name is Shane
Spell
Cuthbert.
that if you can,
yeah. Yeah, ShaneCuthbert. And I'm, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the socials, YouTube and things like that. So get in touch if you've got any concerns or, if you need any help with anything, let me know. But and perhaps we can work together. Excellent.
And just for everybody else, anybody who has questions on the show, you can also get in touch with me via my email, which is Dennis, DENNIS, at awakeninginhealth.com. And that's spelt as I'm saying it. Very interesting conversation we've had this morning about, really, to kind of summarize it, would be we're paying a lot of money for these big bodies who are meant to be working for us, but it actually seems that in reality that may be not quite the case. And it seems to be there's a push which is necessary, that we do have a little bit more accountability.
100%.
Okay. And I think the other thing which I'm hearing from Shane is that this is a really big mission here. We can't do this on our own. We need help. We need support. So it's one thing having warriors or fighters on the front, but we need backup. We need support. We need other people in the community to be standing up as well and making these people accountable. And you've had an interesting background for sure, but I do a lot of, I guess, kind of community stuff as well. But we're not getting paid for this stuff. It's just our passion, because we are going to have kids or grandkids. We need to be getting the community to be operating more effectively, I think.
Yep.
Would you say? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's we don't get paid.
Yeah.
So we are just here because we are passionate about the community. We care about it. We want to see a safer, greater community.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I appreciate even, Cairns FM 89.1 allowing me to jump on here and have a rant. And as I said, these are my opinions. I'm not reflecting opinions of the station in any way, but, supporting your community, just getting out there, talking amongst each other is absolutely pivotal. We're coming to the top of the hour now very soon. We've got about a minute left on the show. And, just any final little words there you want to squeeze in that last minute, Shane?
Look, I'd just like to say thanks for having me on as well, and giving me the opportunity to talk. I mean, we've met before. We met actually at a Victims of Crime rally outside Parliament. That's correct. We were both there because we're concerned members of the community. So, thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Yeah, mate, absolute pleasure having you here as well today. Just a quick reminder about the weather. We are speaking from Cairns. High chance of showers near the coast. There's a low of 21 degrees C and a high of 28 degrees. You've been listening this morning to Dennis O'Connor at Awakening in Health. And I'll just repeat my email if anybody wants to get back in touch with me. That's Dennis, DENNIS, at awakeninginhealth.com. And I'm happy to talk to people about any issues in relation to this show or health issues in general. Thank you very much for listening today.